Hi, and welcome to another episode of If It's in the Mind, It Can Be Managed. And today we have got Susan Archibald from Coaching SA, which you are up at Ben Nevis area,
We're
right?
Fort William, yep. The
Fort William.
outdoor capital.
Beauty. Do you know it's stunning up at Fort William? I've been there a few times. I've stayed on holiday up there. I got my little Nessie toy from Fort William that I've got on my TV. So, Susan, tell everyone, introduce yourself to our lovely podcast. If it's in the mind, it can be managed. Susan, tell me a little bit about you.
Yeah, so as you said, I'm from Fort William. I was born at Inverness. I grew up here. I have two grown-up children. I'm a granny. I am,
Wow.
I know, I know. It's the clean living that I would like to say that it keeps me looking young, but well, it was just a fluke, I think.
You've got good air up there. You have got good air up in
We
the
have, we
Fort
have.
William.
We're very lucky. I absolutely love it. I've stayed in the city. I stayed in Edinburgh. I have done a lot of things over my years, dabbled in retail. I have done some office work. Tried different things. I've done cleaning jobs. I've done bar work. But 7 years ago, I was in a really shit place. So I have, I think, a bit like yourself, suffered through with depression, anxiety. It's never ever actually been diagnosed. I think looking back now, at one point it was more grief that I was suffering
Hmm.
rather than, but there's that medical label that it's given. So we've also had a lot of mental health issues, and suicide's been very prevalent. It's up here in the Highlands. It's really really high statistics with suicide. So, but anyway, I managed to turn my life around 7 years ago and was using a lot of things to do with your mind, learning and reading about how to look after my mind,
Yeah,
how to change my whole life around,
yeah,
which I did by using my mindset.
yeah.
So I was drinking every single day. I was using that as a crutch. I was smoking. Didn't smoke much, but I was smoking. And I decided, no, that wasn't my life. That's not who I was. I didn't feel like I was living to my true values. So, yeah. So I got in there and I just took control of what was going on in my mind. And I'd like to say if it was easy, but it wasn't, because obviously I had been a certain way for a long time. I think when you grow up in certain environments as well, that, it becomes a way of life. What's around you, you pick up on that. So, yeah, short of it, I changed my life around with my mindset and using exercise, which led me on to realizing that there was something that really needed to be here in Fort William, some extra help for people that were struggling with their mental health. Because as I've said, suicide is absolutely, it's it's a craze up here, really. It's so, so sad. I counted it. Interestingly, I've always thought about counting it, and my brain's gone, nope, we're not going there. I would start thinking about some of the families, and my brain would go, no, as you know, protection, we're not going there. So we had another suicide not that long ago, and I just thought, no, I'm going to count it. I want to count it and see how many families. So 27 families that I know of, some obviously very close, my own family, my brother, I lost my brother, find my brother, he had passed away due to neglect. He'd had several attempts at suicide, and my daughter's partner at the time, he completed suicide, cousins, mum and dad's cousin, mum's friend, too many people that I know, close people and acquaintances. So I knew there was something that needed to be happening. So that took me down the road of helping people.
Hmm.
But what I wanted to do, obviously, is I wanted to help people anyway before I changed my life around. And the one person that I had to change was myself first, so that I knew that it works. I had to take control of myself and my thoughts. So it's kind of a bit hypocritical to try and help people when you don't do the work and you don't do it yourself. That's how I feel. That's my personal opinion.
And look, personal opinions, that's what it's all about. There's nothing wrong with having a personal opinion. It doesn't mean to say that you're right or wrong, but it was just the journey that you had to go on.
Yeah.
So, from what I know of Fort William, and this is me just asking questions because it's quite spread out in Fort William. Is there a close network of people, or is like the housing and the people live quite far apart. Would loneliness play a part in it in any way whatsoever, or has there been some other themes up in Fort William?
Interestingly, we've done this, and I had this question not that long ago from a girl who actually is from Fort William. She was over in Australia, and she was back, and we went for a swim, and she's like, "What is it, Susan? What is it?" And I was like, "I wish I knew the answer. I really do wish I knew the answer." Whether it is going back generational things, whether it's something my mum always said was because they have the aluminium factory and they had the pulp mill factory. She used to say years ago the pollution, was a big factor. Now, obviously, in Scotland, we have that drinking culture.
Yeah.
There's the drinking culture, whether there's still quite a lot of drugs in Fort William. Might look like a lovely, beautiful wee place, but as you know yourself, you've got your wee pockets in certain areas that, these things exist. Yeah, you can go into thinking, like I say, back to generational things. I'm very passionate about learning all about these things. And is it just something that's there now because it has been happening for all these years that, the younger generations are thinking, well, what's happened then? So
Yeah.
there's not one specific thing really that you can put your finger on and say, well, it's because of that. I think it's a lot of things.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, honestly, you obviously know Fort William a lot better than I do. So thank you for sharing on that one. Now, before we started the podcast, we were talking about the difference between, because you mentioned you had to get your mindset right. You had to get your mindset right. And I think people still underestimate the power of mindset. They still underestimate the power of if your mindset versus mental health. If you have a great mindset, your mental health will be better. Mm-hmm. And there's still that massive stereotype, and I do this in a lot of the trainings that I do for businesses and things like that, is that the big confusion between mental illness and mental health. Mental health is keeping yourself healthy mentally, so that because we can build a resilience to stress. And I think one of the biggest things that we can share in this podcast, as we do with a lot of the trainings and stuff like that, is stress, anxiety, and depression are emotions. They're emotional states that we can actually change by understanding our thoughts and by understanding those feelings that are creating those emotions and the beliefs that we have. Always comes from beliefs. But I think people underestimate the power of beliefs. And if you've never read the book, I've got a feeling you will have, Susan, and I know I've mentioned it before, and I'm looking to my bookcase just over the other side. It's The Biology of Belief. Right. I'm trying to think of the name of the Biology of Belief by, it's right there, the book. Oh, I can't think. Find the book, Biology of Belief.
Mm-hmm. I haven't read it.
Oh, it's a phenomenal book. It is quite technical at the first, and I'm going to have to get through this as best I can. But Biology of Belief, a phenomenal book. That just the beliefs that we have create our focus, our outcome, and our understanding of what we are. And if people don't understand, there's still this stereotype around mental illness and mental health. And you've had experience with mental illness, which is different. So tell us about that, Susan.
Talking about obviously what we were talking about earlier within our family circle, So one of my older brothers, I'm the youngest of 6.
Wow.
So one of my older brothers who's still surviving, he was sectioned. I can't even remember. I mean, I think he was a young adult, late teens. I think when we look back on it, there's a lot to do with drugs and alcohol, but also there was always something just slightly different about my brother. Absolutely got the biggest heart you could ever want. He's so kind, he's so caring, but he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and manic depressive.
Yeah.
So so there is a big difference with that. Unfortunately, I would like to see that he's okay, but he self-medicates. So he's never liked taking the medication for it.
Right.
Unfortunately. But like I say, he can be the most kind, caring person. So that to me, obviously schizophrenia is a diagnosed mental illness.
And for anyone listening to this podcast and they're like, well, what's the difference? Because I actually might do a TikTok on this one, is what's the difference between, I call it the monkey mind, the conversations.
Yep.
So I'm a passionate believer in letting everyone know about the monkey mind, about the conversations that we have. If you don't know that you're having conversations, or you're listening to this podcast thinking, oh, I have that conversation. Oh my God, I have that conversation. A lot of people think that other people don't have the conversations, only the people with schizophrenia, but they're having conversations. Does that mean I'm schizophrenic? And we're like, no, no, no. Everybody's got an internal voice. Everyone's got an internal conversation. It will be emotionally driven, and it makes us struggle to be able to think, oh my, is there something else? And we go back to that label, I'm broken. Nobody's broken. No one needs fixing. We just need a better understanding of self. It's just a powerful, powerful thing to pass on if there's anything anyone takes away from this. But everybody has that internal conversation. The difference between schizophrenia is people don't know the difference between those conversations and can take action on those conversations. Whereas me, with my monkey mind, I have conversations, but I don't take action on those conversations. And I think that's a big, massive difference for a lot of people, is understanding I don't have to take action on every one of my thoughts. And that's a powerful thing for people to learn and understand.
Yeah.
And what's your thoughts on that, Susan?
Yeah, definitely. It is. It's that reality. We can sit here. We all have that internal voices. We do. And I find with what I'm doing with the voluntary peer-to-peer support group and in the coaching, it's letting people know that it's okay. We do have these thoughts, and it's taking control of these thoughts. Whereas with the schizophrenia, you can't. There's
Yep.
no, there's no, that's there. It's as
Yep.
if it's another reality that's with you.
Yep.
Whereas it's different for us. There's just that one reality, although we have these voices.
Yep.
Interestingly, sorry. That's a different story about an almond tip.
It's up to
But
you.
yeah,
You share as
absolutely.
what you want to share.
Absolutely. No, we do. We have to, and it's trying to get people to understand that yes, we have these voices and these thoughts, but it's taking control of them, and it's learning to take control of them. Something that I do with people is, well, here's a yellow lemon. What are you thinking about now? Yellow lemon, isn't it? Okay, so here is an orange. What are you thinking about? An orange. Okay, so that's a choice you've made. You've made a choice to then focus on something else. So if a negative thought goes into your head, think of a positive one, isn't it? Schizophrenia, you can't do that.
Yeah.
It's too far gone for that. Although I did Dr. Was it Raj Chikatri? Do you
Right.
know him? Yeah,
I don't think I do. Not heard of that one.
check him out. I'll look him up and I'll send you the link. He's on Instagram, and I was reading it. A doctor that was on one of his podcasts, and they're actually looking into other stuff that can actually turn the schizophrenia around by going keto. It's not proven, and it was one woman who was like 70 odd. She'd been diagnosed and had so many, like you can imagine the chaotic lifestyle she'd had, in and out, attempts of suicide, and this is what they'd done. They took all the chemicals out of her body by doing keto. I didn't read the
It
whole.
makes sense, though. It makes sense because now there's a lot of scientific research that suggests that depression comes from the gut.
Mm-hmm. Your gut, your
Depression
mind.
comes from the gut and the food, and and I don't sit here as the healthiest eating food person in Scotland in any way whatsoever. But I know I feel better when I have less carbs or less sugary carbs. My conversations are not as like when I go more protein, fats, and food based and less
Vegetables.
carbs. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying carbs are the devil in any way. I don't want anyone getting oh, you can't talk about carbs like that. No, the carbs that I eat are not always the best. If it's cake and sugary, I know that my thoughts are a little bit more erratic. It's the same after alcohol. I'm not a big drinker,
Absolutely.
but the day after alcohol, I'm always a little bit more. Oh God, I should be doing something. I'm laying on the couch and I get really upset with that. It happened last week, and I'd had a drink the night before, and I was like, oh God, I should be doing something. I'm like, no, just let it pass, just relax. It's the drink from last night. It's fine. It's okay. But I do get down the day after the drink, and it's because your monkey mind is more receptive and more open, and my emotions and my thoughts are a little bit more wild after the drink. Yeah.
Totally. 100%. And this is where, with me turning my whole life around, this is all key as well
Yeah.
to help him with it, with the mind, was stopping the drinking, stopping the smoking, was exercising more, found CrossFit, eating cleaner, eating healthier, so it is, our bodies are just amazing, amazing vessels. I was going to say something else, but they're vessels because we're only here. I believe I'm quite spiritual, so I believe we're borrowing these bodies. We're spiritual people. So,
Absolutely. I love spirituality.
and
Yeah.
we do not give their body enough recognition, enough. Oh man, we don't look after it. People look after their phones and their cars better than they look after their own bodies. And this is where
Oh, that's a good one.
totally they do. You're not going to go and you're going to ask someone to go and put a litre of shite in their car. They're not going to do it, are they? But they're going to go to the pub and neck back a. See, this is something I said years ago, and I've heard it, other people saying it, and it is so actually true. It is so, so true. We poison ourselves, and that has a big, big impact on our mental health.
Absolutely. So as a coach, Susan, and
Yep.
because you're going through somatic trauma therapy training.
Yep.
And that's going to be the effect of trauma on the nervous system. But we talked about this, and that trauma is, everybody has trauma. There'll be somewhere along the lines that someone's had trauma. And I've mentioned this on a previous podcast, and I think somebody did reach out to me about that. But technically, it's the meaning we give to the experience that would decide whether it's trauma or non-trauma identified within us. So, and I've mentioned this before, if a lady has a pregnancy and she goes through childbirth, the meaning she gives to it is, I've given birth to life. This is life. This is fantastic. So there's no trauma meaning towards that instance. However, having something ripped out of you like it is trauma. It's traumatic. It's a horrible experience, but meaning. We underestimate the power of meaning to everything that's happened to us, which is why some people live with trauma and move on and just like, yep, move on. And then some people don't. It comes down to meaning. What's your thoughts on that, Susan?
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of agree with that as well. You don't realise like going getting a filling out can be bloody, or tooth out can be traumatic. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
If you don't like going to the dentist, you don't like the pain. How traumatic is that for somebody? So yeah, and is anything like that. I had a traumatic experience because I'd broken my wrist. The actual break of the wrist wasn't so bad, but getting it pinned and coming round from obviously the operation, and that was absolutely horrendous because they put my cast on too tight and the pins were on. They just kept filling me full of bloody painkillers.
Oh,
eventually they had to cut it open, and that was fine. And then on top of that was to go back to get the pins out. So my body, my mind was remembering what had happened after my operation.
yeah.
So this nurse, who I think should have been retired, turned around and told me, but Susan, children get these things out, I was like, okay, can you just go and get the doctor for me, please? She went away off in a huff. I was like, I certainly don't trust you. You're going to yank these out and you're going to hurt me. And my body, my mind's remembering that pain. So that's your trauma, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's what you're remembering. It's, have you read The Body Keeps Score?
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. So you read that, and you'll have heard the stories about, obviously, some soldiers go to war and some come back with really bad PTSD and some are okay,
Yeah.
and again, this is where it goes back to your childhood trauma and what traumas you've had and what you've experienced. So your body keeps score of all of that. Great book. I've not read it all yet. It's quite long, actually. But so this is where the somatic thing comes into it. It's stored in your body, these little things. So that was actually just off the cuff there, and that's how I could explain it with my wrist.
Yeah.
Was that had happened then, but my body, my mind remembers it. So when I went back to the nurse for her to do it, was like, whoa, you're gonna hurt me.
So when it comes to like the trauma responses that people have and things, and I use NLP when I'm working with clients. I love NLP. I don't know if you've looked into NLP or you've done the coaching of NLP, but I do love the power of understanding key decisions that we've made as children. Don't really bode well with us now as adults, and we can make different decisions when we look back and we go to the pain points. I think through life that we do avoid the pain points, and that's why we keep generating more upset, because while we're avoiding, we're actually attracting it in. We're looking for it. We're looking for it to happen so we can avoid it. Whereas if we start looking in a different direction, which is what I think that's probably because we've got a common interest, which is cold water therapy.
Yeah.
And I think I saw you go in. Is it where do you dip? What's the name of the water?
Well, we can go in Loch Linney, so there's a couple of places we go in there, or the River Nevis up the Glen.
Right.
We go all over, do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? So
of course.
wherever there's water, you know yourself, you're like, oh, okay.
I've always got me dipping stuff in the back of the car. So I, as yourself, I adore cold water therapy. And somebody asked, because there's a cold water therapy course that people can do so they can become a cold water therapy instructor.
Yeah.
And somebody asked me and said, oh, what's the medical implications? And I'm like, it's a tricky one to call because it's a tricky one to call because anyone who does cold water therapy and has done the research into cold water therapy where there's not much proof for the benefits of it, but there's people that say this has changed my life.
Yeah.
Then you've got medical experts saying actually there's not much proof, but then there's the proof of the power of placebo. So my placebo is going in the water. I hate it some days. I walk down when it's raining going, what are you doing? Why am I going in? And you know why you're going in, for the feeling you get when you get out, when you've tackled something that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what life is, isn't it? Is once you've tackled and gone into something that you didn't want to do. Let's take you as an instance, Susan, is you realize that you had to go through your changes yourself. It was you, it was the accountability of one.
Yep. 100%.
And that's when we take ourselves away from blaming and we say, what do I need to do? And I think for anyone that should listen into this or is understanding the power of accountability.
100%.
And Susan, how do you find when you're a coach and you want to create that place to attract the clients that you? What's the name of your? Is it Mind Fit? No, that's the men's group up in.
No, that's the peer-to-peer support groups. It's Look After Mind Fit. So we have the men's group on a Monday and we have the women's group on a Tuesday.
Right. And what is it? What you're a mental health and fitness coach?
I'm a qualified mental health and fitness exercise coach. Yep.
Exercise coach, fantastic. Yep. And cold water therapy. What is your thoughts, Susan?
So, living in a beautiful place like this, you know yourself, summertime, you're like, oh, in at the river and stuff like that. A few years ago, we're talking pre-COVID, yeah, probably dipping in and out. Was never one for doing it in the winter. Not a chance. I was like, whoa, that's just too much. And then started kind of dabbling a wee bit. I was like, oh, maybe, yeah, okay. Let's do this. Let's challenge ourselves to do this, because it's all about challenging. And I think for me, when I started changing my life around to gain confidence, you have to push yourself. And it can become so addictive to push yourself and challenge yourself. And this is how we grow, isn't it? This is how we grow mentally. This is how we can grow physically and emotionally. All of these things is by pushing ourselves past that comfort zone. Yes, there's times when we do need to stay comfy and stuff like that. But the majority of our time, again, talking about the mind, is this false narrative that we give ourselves that, we can't do these
things. Story.
Totally. The stories we tell ourselves, or we've been told as children growing up,
The power of beliefs comes from the stories we tell.
Yes, 100%.
That's a TikTok tomorrow. I'm doing a TikTok of that tomorrow. I do all my TikToks going in and out of the water.
Right. I don't do TikTok.
I only just started. Somebody said you've got to get on TikTok. I'm like, all right, okay, go on TikTok. It's an absolute nightmare because you start looking at other people's stuff, and I'm like, oh my god, there's so much out there. There's just
exactly. I get lost as it is, and other things on Instagram looking at videos like. So
you can understand why people have what they believe is a mental health or a problem or the fear of being broken, because the amount of self-diagnosis going on. And I was reading some facts, and I don't know if it was 82% or 86%, and I've mentioned this before in some of the blogs that I do as well, is it's either 82 or 86% of all diagnoses for ADHD, for anxiety, stress, depression are misdiagnosed. It could even be unresolved trauma that you just need to work on.
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
Unresolved trauma.
This goes back to the whole label things we were talking about.
This is why we talked about the labels, yes.
Yes. So and I think this is where we're talking about coaching, and this is where the beauty of coaching comes into it. I think, I don't know about yourself, but obviously through me and my traumatic experiences through my life, it has led me to learn so much more about trauma, and this is why I've gone into the somatic trauma informed. I don't think there's enough people, professionals included, and this is my opinion, are not trauma informed.
Mhm.
We've kind of gone off track here, didn't we? We're
No,
going to
not really. No,
cold
no,
water.
it's a podcast talking about
Yeah,
coaching and mental wellness.
yeah,
Yes, if it's in the mind, it can be managed.
yes, absolutely, totally. And I think that's the beauty of it. You know, coaching, we it, there's so many red tapes and there's so many guidelines, you know, learning something from a book, and then you have to have this red tape. Whereas I think with us as coaches, it's not as so much red tape there. You can expand on it a little bit, and you can do these things like take people cold water swimming,
Yes.
you know. Okay, it's and the beauty for me with doing the cold water, like I say, and I started doing it and then started realizing actually this is really good. This is really good. You know, this is really helping. It was more to do with the pushing past the comfort zone. And then, well, yeah, the water's one of the healing properties, isn't it? It's just amazing being out in nature as well. So you've got all of this connecting with other people. So you've got all of these really positive things that are there to help our mental health that you don't know about. We're not taught about this in school and stuff like that, are you?
No.
So it's so yeah, so doing the cold water for the last few years and has had a massive effect. Last year, the February, not I before, what were we on 23, 22, and I done a 30 days, was January through to February. One of my other friends that I met through the mental health and exercise coaching program, she was doing the 30 days, whatever it was, 31 days, and took part in that with other girls, and we were out, and honestly, hilarious in all weathers, as you can imagine, you
Yeah.
know. And I'm a Taurian, so I'm stubborn. So if I've said I'm going to do something, I will do something. If I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? I will do it. Certainly now these days, years ago, possibly maybe I would have not done it, but nowadays I stick to my word, and if I'm going to do it, do it. So we did do it. And then from last winter, we were doing it a couple of times a week, taking other girls out. We would go on a Sunday, the wee group of us. The usual, a lot of people kind of shy away when it gets really cold, don't they? Apart from the
Very
hardcore.
true. It's yeah, no, there's a lot of people dip. I prefer dipping in the winter. I've said this many a time before.
I couldn't wait for it to get colder. And
Yeah,
as soon as it got colder, you're just like, oh, there it
I
is.
love the ice dips.
There it is.
I love the ice dips. When you talked about the comfort zone there, and when you genuinely talk about getting in ice, whether you do it in a tub or on a lock or in a river, getting in ice, realizing actually the water's quite warm under the ice anyway, strangely enough.
Holy.
You broke the ice and you get into the water, you're like, oh, this is quite warm, which is the strangest thing because it heats up. It's the ice that you've got to break, which is the same as the comfort zone. Once you get past the ice, you get back into the growth zone. You're learning, and that's the part of it. But
Yeah.
actually, the whole thing of the ice is absolutely outstanding. It genuinely is.
It is absolutely. I love it. I love seeing the benefits that it has for other people, you know.
Yeah.
I really do. I think for me, seeing that, I mean, and like we talk about it all the time as well in the group, you know, people think that, you know, it's all right, you've been doing it for so long, so it's easy. And you're like, it kept me on. And this is why
Yeah.
one morning I'm like, no, I really do not want to go out on this freezing cold morning. I would really like to stay in my nice comfy bed, but that's not going to help me, and that's not going to take me to where I want to be, you know. So I have to push past that. You know, it's like exercising as well. You know, I knew last week I hadn't had a long run since we'd done the ultra marathon, and I knew it was going to hurt, but I had to do it, and I had to push myself out of that comfort zone, and just, oh, it was painful.
What's the ultra marathon then? What's explain that one?
Oh,
I'm
that's
clearly
really
not a
nice.
marathon runner.
No, but this is really nice. That's the Loch Ness 24. So you do 7K laps, as many 7K laps you can in 24 hours. So I was, ugh,
So,
ugh.
wow.
Yeah. So
Just
I
don't
got,
stop running for 24 hours.
people don't, the guy who won it was 29 laps. I know, honestly, like, and that's talking about your mind.
That's
The
David
women,
Goggins stuff, that is, isn't it?
aye,
That's next level. Even I'm not David Goggins style. There's some things I still veer away. I'm like, nah, I'm all right. I'm 46. I'm fine. It's all right. I've done enough pushing myself.
So the top female she done 24 laps. Just like an hour. It's like 1 hour. You're like, anyway, we managed. I was recovering from my second lot of COVID. What fractured my ankle. See, I'll give you this is a cracking story for you. So I fractured my ankle running down. This is the power of the mind. I fractured my ankle running down the front of the bend on the bend path, doing a training run. I was having a great run, coming down, brilliant morning. Everyone coming down, really great form. Morning, morning. I'm like bouncing down like a wild goat, and then a guy stopped in front of me, and his mate came right up with the side of him instead of behind him. So of course I had to kind of like stop myself. Went over my ankle. It's like, oh, right, okay. So I know that was sore because I kind of have seen my ankle go right over.
Oh.
But I was like, right, okay, don't think about it. Don't think about it. And I was like, you're fine. You're going to get down this hill and you're going to get to the car. And that's what got me home. So if I had started and got into that mindset that I just fractured and really hurt my ankle, I wouldn't have got down that hill.
I'm hurting and I'm not even sat on a hill right now.
That is the power of your mind.
It's
100%.
the power of the mind. It's the power of focus as well. It's the power of focus, because the second you told me that story, I was thinking the last time I walked a Munro when I was too heavy to be walking Munros, and I thought, oh, I'll go and do a Munro. And I got about 20 minutes into it going, what are you doing? You are actually too, because that's when I was doing strongman training. I'm like, no, that was 24 stone I was. And I'm like, no. And I got a 3/4 of the way up, tears started. And the guy was like, I thought you were a mind management coach. I'm like, all right, I'll carry on. But I knew I shouldn't have done it. I actually should have walked away, because I got to the top and I'm like, I know that's not the hard part. I knew that the hard part was 24 stone coming down on the knee joints on the way down to the Munro. I have never cried and howled so much in my life. But I'll tell you the one thing that I did do, and that you'll love this, because it was up, it was Ben Creek or something like that, up Fort William, where I was close to Fort William. And the only thing I said to the guys that were driving around, I need a lock. I need a lock. What for? I went, I need to get in cold water. Just get me in cold water. And they were like, oh, you're mental. I'm like, no, what was mental was climbing the Munro. I need to regenerate. I've got to get in a lock. And I was sat in frozen water in a lock, and they were like, you're mental. I'm like, no, this is what you need to be doing. It's weird. Whether it's placebo, whether it's like the power of the mind, get in cold water. Yeah, it's all about the cold.
Yep.
Yeah,
That helped my recovery as well.
Yeah.
Definitely helped my recovery. Like I say, I'm quite stubborn as well, but I think we were, what was I? That was the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I went to the hospital, and I think I rested for 4 days. I think that following Sunday, I went with my friends down to Oban. We normally do a yoga and go for a dip, and because I knew the beach was nice and gentle to get in, that's the cold water helped that recovery. Totally.
Absolutely. Cold water.
So
I know I did.
That was me. So I fractured it, managed to get down the hill. I had a competition to go to, a CrossFit competition. And I remember one I had 12 weeks. 12 weeks. So one girl was like, oh, I would really go and do it, but I can't do it. And I'm like, I'll be there. Oh, you've not fractured yet? Yeah, I have. But I've got 12 weeks of recovery. I knew I'd be doing my cold water, and I knew I would be fit enough to carry on and do it. And I did.
That's amazing. That's definitely been mind fit, isn't it?
Totally mind fit.
See the loop? That's the loop. That was how we're wrapping up the podcast. Brought it right back around to mind fit for you. Absolutely fantastic. Look, thank you for sharing, Susan, because it's important, and it's always great to get that message out to people as well. And if you hadn't have known, and if you didn't understand and gone on your journey of learning, we get stuck in that again, people thinking, oh, if my father or my family's had a mental health issue, then I have to have a mental health, and that's not true. That's actually not true in any way whatsoever. But that's the power of beliefs, and the power of the beliefs. And I still think this is one of the most, whether this is true or not, but when we learn things, and I'm like, oh, I need to remember that. And it's the power of fleas in a jar. Put fleas in a jar and put the lid on. I think you leave the lid on for 24 hours. After 24 hours, you take the lid off. The fleas never jump higher than the lid ever again.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the children, the baby fleas, they then never jump higher. And there's no lid, and they don't jump higher than what their parents have told them. And that is exactly the power of belief. And that's intrinsically what's wrong, is we have to get that message out there. And I think there's so many places you can get messages out there, in all fairness, but the podcast is one of them. So look, how do we get in contact with Susan Archibald, or Archibald SA Coaching?
So SA Coaching on Instagram, and it's SA Coaching on Facebook. My email is just my own personal email. I don't have a business one, so you can find me on either of those social platforms. That's the only two I use, because I can't. My mind would just go off onto TikTok videos as well as Instagram videos.
It's I've got, after I've posted stuff, and it's like, say, you stay in TikTok, and then you see people arguing with each other. And I know there's all this premise of arguing with people to get your point across, and I'm like, oh, it's just exhausting. But there we go. That's a personal judgment of mine.
Yeah, no need for it.
Susan,
yeah, thank you very much.
Not a problem. It's been a pleasure having you on. Is there anything you want to share for your final thoughts?
I don't know. Yeah, just be very careful of your mind. It's one of the most powerful tools you'll have. And when it's used right, it can take you many places. And don't let anyone tell you you can't. Go and do it. And
Well
take
done.
photos. Show them you can.
Thank you very much, Susan. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone. As always, I'm the host of your podcast. It is In the Mind. It can be managed. Big love from Cuddy, as always. Make your mind a priority. It's what we do on a daily basis. All the best, and we'll see you in the next podcast.